They remembered. They just didn't come. It's a peculiar sort of silence, the kind that grows louder with each tick of the kitchen clock. You don't notice it at first. You're too busy brushing crumbs off the tablecloth, adjusting a place card that already sits straight, checking the oven for the 5th time, though the roast won't be done for another hour. But then it settles around you, heavy and soft, like dust in sunlight, and you understand. They're not coming. I circled the date back in October, a red ink, big as hope. 78. No candles yet, just penciled plans and mental notes. The cake, lemon chiffon, was already baked and cooling when I made the last phone call 2 weeks ago. Of course we're coming, Grandma, they said, every voice warm with certainty. Wouldn't miss it for the world. So I believed them enough to pull the good china from its high shelf, a mother's set, the one with the gold trim. I ironed the linen napkins by hand. I wrote each name on a folded card with my best cursive and placed them where the laughter used to be. Danny's seat by the window, Emma's with the velvet cushion she used to hate. 6 places, 6 chairs, 6 stories of my life. By 4:30, the candles were lit. By 5, the silence was louder. I checked my phone, no missed calls, no voicemails, just that still, glowing screen, until it buzzed. A group text, confetti emojis, a string of names, and one hollow sentence. Happy birthday, Grandma. We're all slammed today. Rain check? No punctuation, no call, no visit. I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. I typed thank you, then deleted it. I wrote miss you all, then erased that, too. What do you say to a choir of silence dressed in digital cheer? I turned off the phone. I left the candles burning. I cut a slice of cake just honia and ate it by myself at the table I set for 6. The frosting melted against the plate, untouched on every other slice. I didn't cry. Instead, I opened the cedar chest in the hallway, the one that smells like lavender and dust and memory. Inside, hand-drawn birthday cards from another time, a purple crown made of felt, a photo of Emma with frosting on her nose, whispering, "You're better than cake, Grandma." I sat there with those things, not to wallow, but to remember that I'd once been their whole world. Before calendars filled and phones replaced faces, before group texts became stand-ins for presents, and in that quiet, something inside me stirred, not rage, not sorrow, something older, something steadier. The next morning, I put on my good cardigan, the soft pink one, and went to the diner down the road. The waitress remembered me. Happy belated. She beamed. She brought me a slice of cherry pie on the house. I left her a $20 tip, not because I had to, because it felt good. The kind of good that says, I still matter, I still give. When I got home, I printed the group text. I put it in a simple frame. Beneath it scribbled a small note in my own hand. You taught me something valuable, and I meant it. They hadn't shown up, but I had. And that, I think, is when everything began to change. It started, as most things do, small, almost invisible. 2 weeks before my birthday, I called Emma my middle granddaughter, the one with the sunny laugh and the mismatched socks. She was in college now, studying environmental science, always talking about coral reefs and compost. I'd mailed her a care package last Friday, socks, a book of poems. She sent a thank you text with a sunflower emoji. That was the last I'd heard. But this time she answered on the second ring. Grandma. Hey. There was background noise, voices, the clink of dishes, a dorm cafeteria, maybe. I imagined her holding the phone with one hand, balancing a tray in the other. I just wanted to check if you're still planning to come on the 12th, I said, smiling as I said it. Smiling, though no one could see. You know, Sunday dinner. For my birthday. There was a pause, just long enough to notice. Oh, yeah, totally. I think so. It's just a broken bar. Midterms are brutal right now. But I'll try. I mean it, I'll try. She said it brightly. Too brightly. I nodded, though she couldn't see that either. Of course, dear. If you can't make it, I understand. School comes first. No, I want to. I just need to check my schedule, you know. I'll text the group later. I said goodbye and set the phone down. The warmth in her voice still lingered, but it was lighter than it used to be, like a song she only half remembered. Later that day, I called my eldest, Mark, he picked up breathless. Hey, Mom, everything okay? I could hear the click of a car blinker, the low thrum of traffic. Oh yes, I said. Just confirming Sunday. For the birthday dinner. There was another pause. Right. This weekend's been a broken bar, a bit packed. Shelley has a thing for work, and Jake's got his robotics meet. But we'll see what we can do. You're busy. I know. No, Noah, don't cancel anything. I'm sure we'll work it out. He said it as if trying to reassure himself more than me. I hung up and looked around the kitchen. The counter still held the handwritten grocery list. Butter, cream, candied lemon peel. The cake would take 2 days if I did it right. That evening, I set the table. Not fully. Not yet, but I laid out the linen runner, smoothed it flat, took the good silver out of the drawer and ran a cloth over each handle, just in case, just in faith. Then, as I passed the fridge, I caught sight of the calendar. The date was already circled in red. My birthday, a Sunday dinner. I had written it in October, right after the leaves turned. But now, for the first time, I noticed the other markings. A tiny post-it with SATH. Robotics Regionals, a penciled note that said, midterms, a scribbled reminder Shelley, client dinner prep. None of it malicious, none of it new, just life, stacking itself on top of me until I became part of the clutter. I stood there for a long time, staring at the calendar. The red circle seemed smaller than it had the day I drew it. Not erased, just a broken bar crowded. A few days later, I called Lucy. She answered from her car, voice muffled through Bluetooth. Hey, Grandma. What's up? Oh, I didn't mean to catch you driving. No, it's fine. Just on my way to yoga. I've been meaning to call. What's going on? I just wanted to remind you about dinner on Sunday. Oh gosh. I think I might have mentioned to Ryan we'd go upstate for the weekend. His friend has a cabin. I laughed softly. That sounds lovely. Don't let me keep you from the lake. No, I mean a well. Maybe we can swing by late if we make it back in time. Only if it's not too much trouble, I said. There was a pause. Grandma, broken bar, it's just a birthday, right? I smiled then. A small one, but real. Yes, dear, it's just a birthday. I made soup that night. Potato leek, my favorite. Arthur used to love it, especially with warm bread. I ate alone, as I often did. Nothing new in that. But after the dishes were washed and the leftovers sealed into glass containers, I walked back to the dining room and looked at the table. The runner was still there. The place cards waited in a neat stack. I had written each name by hand with the pen Arthur gave me for our 30th anniversary. The ink hadn't faded, but something in me had. Not bitterness, not sadness, not exactly. Just a soft, quiet knowing that the world had shifted a few degrees while I wasn't looking, that the orbit of my family no longer circled me the way it once did. I was still a planet, but further now, dimmer, and yet a broken bar. I kept the circle on the calendar, not for them, for me, because maybe the worst part wasn't that they were starting to forget my birthday, it was how gently, how easily, they assumed I would understand. There's a kind of forgetting that doesn't announce itself. No slammed doors, no angry words, just little omissions, quiet, repeated, and painless for everyone but you. I'd started noticing it around the time the family group chat changed names. It used to be Sunday dinners, then one day it became Weekend Warriors. I didn't mind the Namia names are just names, but after that, the tone shifted. Memes I didn't understand, jokes that didn't land, plans made without me. We're thinking brunch on 5th. Who's bringing the wine? Lucy, you've got the playlist, right? I'd scroll through the messages with my thumb, pausing only when I saw my name. Once, someone typed, "Should we ask Grandma?" And then there was no reply. The thread just continued as if the suggestion had been swept away by wind. I didn't say anything. What would I say? Instead, I did what I've always done. I fed the routine. Every morning, I brewed coffee in the old percolator Arthur gave me. I measured the grounds with the same worn spoon. 1 scoop. 2 scoops. Tap the lid. Wait for the hiss. The smell always reminded me of Saturdays when the kids were little, when Mark and Lucy would burst in from the cold, their cheeks red, begging for pancakes. Now, I made a single slice of toast. No jam, just butter, thinly spread. On Wednesdays, I walked to the market. I'd bring home apples even though no one asked for pie anymore. I'd stand at the stove with cinnamon on my fingertips and think, maybe someone will stop by. They rarely did. One afternoon, I made Emma's favorite cookie, a pecan shortbread. I boxed them neatly and tied the lid with twine. I left them on the porch of her apartment. No note, just a small sticker on top that said, "For you." 2 days later, I saw her post a picture of macarons from a trendy bakery with the caption, "Best cookies ever." She didn't mention mine. I used to keep a drawer full of placemats, each one for a different season. Pumpkins in fall, snowflakes in winter, fresh blooms in spring. I used to rotate them like clockwork. But this year, I left the snowflakes out through April. No one noticed. There was a casserole dish in the freezer marked for Shelley. I'd made it back in November when she was recovering from her sinus surgery. Mark had said they'd stop by to pick it up. They never did. I eventually threw it out when the ice crystals buried the label. At dinner, I no longer set the table. I sat at the counter now, eating soup from the same bowl every night. No need for variety. The bowl was white with a crack on the side, one I glued myself years ago. It leaked a little if the broth was too hot. I didn't mind. The radio was my companion during meals. Classical hour, Bach, Chopin. Sometimes I'd talk back to the announcer. "No, dear, I think the Brahms is better." It was something to fill the silence. Because television, with its laughing crowds and plastic cheer, made the house feel lonelier. I still kept the living room dusted. I watered the plants. I turned on the porch light at dusk. But the mail was thinner than it used to be, more catalogs than letters. The phone rang less often. Most days, not at all. One Thursday, I saw Lucy had posted photos from a family dinner, all of them at a long table in a garden, string lights, smiling faces, toasts in the air. Shelley had made her famous deviled eggs. Jake was flipping burgers. Even little Zoe, barely 2, had frosting on her cheek. I looked at the photo for a long time, then zoomed in. My old salad bowl was there, the one I'd lent to Mark last summer. He'd forgotten to return it. Funny how my things still made it to the table, even when I didn't. I stopped responding to the group chat unless someone asked me directly. They didn't. Often. When Lucy shared her engagement news, I typed a heartfelt congratulations and sent it. A few other messages chimed in after, with gifs and heart emojis. Mine was the only one with punctuation, the only one that got no reply. A few days later, I mailed her a card. Handmade. Pale blue with tiny silver flowers. Inside, I wrote, "Your joy matters to me." It wasn't meant to make her feel guilty. I just didn't know how else to say, "I still see you." I never heard back. One night, I found the birthday cards they used to make me, a box in the hall closet, next to old photo albums and a blanket I crocheted during Arthur's treatments. The cards were colorful, full of crayon hearts and stickers. "To the best grandma, you're my hero." One from Emma Reed, "If love was cake, you'd be the bakery." That one made me laugh even now. I touched the paper gently, as if it might bruise. They used to see me, not just as a helper or a background character, but as someone who held space in their world. Somewhere along the line, that space narrowed. I hadn't vanished. I had simply been a broken bar filed away. The day before my birthday, I made the cake. The kitchen smelled of lemon and sugar, warm and soft like childhood. I piped the frosting carefully, steady hands even after all these years. The swirls weren't perfect, but they were mine. I placed it under the glass dome and stood back. It was a beautiful cake. No one would eat it. But that wasn't the point anymore. There was a time when my birthday meant noise. Not chaos, though sometimes it came close, but noise, the good kind. The rustle of wrapping paper under the couch. Emma's off-key singing as she carried in a cake we'd baked together. Jake pretending to be the Ma A tilde registered tradee, wearing one of Arthur's old ties and announcing, "Dinner is served," with a dramatic bow. The house was full then, full of voices, of motion, of purpose. I remember one year on my 70th, I think, they threw a surprise party, or tried to. Mark had brought in balloons the night before and accidentally popped one in the kitchen. I heard it but pretended not to. The next day, when they all jumped out from behind the sofa yelling, Surprise. I clutched my chest and gasped just enough to make them laugh. Emma made me a card that year. I still have it. It's shaped like a 3-layer cake, each tier a different color. Inside, in looping handwriting, she wrote, "You're better than cake." Jake gave me a handmade coupon, 1 free car wash. Grandma, no complaining. He never redeemed it. Lucy brought me a scarf she'd knit herself in college. It was uneven, one end much wider than the other, but she was so proud. "It's like a hug," she said, wrapping it around my shoulders, and it was, even if it itched. That year, the table was full. Every seat claimed. Laughter bounced off the walls. Arthur's photo stood at the head, tucked between the flower vase and the gravy boat. Someone had placed a party hat on the frame. I didn't take it off. Mark led a toast to Mom, who somehow made this family stick together even when we didn't deserve it. They all clinked glasses, some with sparkling cider, some with wine, and looked at me. I felt seen, not admired, not flattered, just truly, unmistakably seen. The kind of attention you don't ask for. The kind that arrives simply because love did. I wore my blue dress that day, the one with the tiny buttons down the front. Lucy said it made me look regal. I didn't feel regal. I felt content, safe in the noise, warm in the belonging. After dinner, Shelley sat at the piano. She didn't play well, but she played loud. Jake sang, off-key but boldly. Emma joined in with a tambourine she found in the hall closet, and I clapped along, laughing until my sides hurt. Later that night, after the dishes were cleared and the cake had been reduced to crumbs, I found myself alone in the kitchen. The candlelight was soft, the silence golden. I remember thinking, this is the good part. Not the gifts or the attention, but the fullness, the sense that I was a part of something, the center of a circle that still held. I wrote about it in my journal, just a single line. Today I felt loved without asking. Now, when I walk through the same kitchen, it echoes. The scarf Lucy gave me still hangs by the door, but I haven't worn it in years. It's too warm now, or maybe too distant. Jake's coupon is in the top drawer by the fridge, unredeemed, faded. Emma's card, "You're better than cake," sits in the cedar chest, wrapped in tissue. I read it once a year, just long enough to remember who I used to be in their eyes. The table hasn't needed all its chairs in some time. I still set 6, more out of habit than hope, but only one plate gets used. That contesta, it sneaks up on you. You don't notice the shift right away. It starts in small ways. They bring store-bought desserts instead of asking for your recipes. They arrive late, leave early. The hugs get lighter, the laughter more polite, the plans made more around you than with you. Then one day, you're no longer part of the planning. You're the afterthought, the optional presence, the one they send updates to, not invitations. And worse, you begin to adjust. You stop expecting, stop asking. You smile when they forget, as if to make it easier for them. You excuse the silences. You defend the absences. You say, they're busy, even when no one asked for your understanding. And in doing so, you begin to erase yourself. Not all at once, but enough. Enough that a memory of noisy, a full house, a single scarf, a lopsided cake feels like a story from someone else's life. And maybe that's the hardest part. Not that they've changed, but that you remember when they hadn't. The house smelled of lemon and sugar and something warmer I couldn't quite name. Something like memory. I stood in the doorway of the dining room, wiping my hands on the hem of my apron. The candles were set but not lit. The table was laid with the old lace runner, the one my mother hemmed by hand when I first moved into this house. I'd used it every year since. 6 plates, 6 cloth napkins, the porcelain gravy boat, the name cards. I had chosen them carefully this year, handwritten with a calligraphy pen I'd ordered from a catalog in October. Each name in gentle ink: Jake, Shelley, Emma, Lucy, Mark, me. The cake sat under its glass dome on the counter, frosted, finished, beautiful. It was the kind of cake you make when you still believe someone might walk through the door and say, "You did all this for us?" And for a few hours that afternoon, I really believed they would. It had happened before: a late arrival, a surprise bouquet, a voice at the door with a sheepish grin, and a quick hug. I had let that memory press close, let it whisper, maybe this year is the one they remember without being reminded. So I lit the candles, poured water into each glass, set the wine bottle next to the cake. 5:30. Still early. I went upstairs, brushed my hair back neatly, and pinned it in the way Arthur used to like it, softly off the face, not too tight. I put on my good blouse, the pale lavender one with the pearl buttons. The sleeves were looser now, my arms smaller, but I looked in the mirror and smiled anyway. I still looked like me. At 6, I returned downstairs, still no word, no knock, no call, just the hum of the refrigerator and the flicker of candlelight playing against the china. I walked to the phone, checked for missed calls, nothing. Then, at 6:11, it buzzed. My heart lifted in that involuntary way hope does, before it has a chance to be cautious. I picked it up. The screen lit up with color, a group message, 8 names, confetti emojis, streamers, a cartoon cake, a single sentence, "Happy birthday, Grandma, we're all slammed today." Rain check? No punctuation, no call, no visit, just that. I stood still, holding the phone like it might burn through my skin. The words blinked there for a moment, so cheerful, so brief. I didn't sit down, not right away. I just stood. The candles flickered. The wine remained unopened. The chairs stayed empty. I typed a reply, "Thank you," and then backspace. "Maybe next weekend." Erased. My fingers hovered over the screen, suspended in something softer than grief but sharper than silence. Then I locked the phone and turned it face down on the table. The disappointment didn't shout, it didn't even whisper, it simply was. I sat down at the head of the table and reached for the knife. I cut a single slice of the cake. The frosting clung to the blade in perfect, untouched swirls. I placed it gently on my plate, and I ate, one small bite at a time. Not because I was hungry, but because I'd made the cake, and it was beautiful, because this was still my birthday, and I was still here. I didn't cry, I didn't even feel angry. I felt a broken bar still, like something had shifted its weight inside me, settled in, and decided to stay. Hope, when it fades, doesn't always leave a shadow. Sometimes it just folds itself quietly and slips into a drawer you no longer open. The kind of drawer that holds old wrapping paper, birthday cards from years past, photos you used to dust, then forgot. At 7:03, the candles burned low. I blew them out, one by one. The smoke curled upward in gentle threads. I whispered, "Make a wish." Just out of habit. But I didn't wish. I was too old for that now. It's a strange thing, the moment you realize your presence has become a formality, not a necessity, not a joy, just a broken bar, something to be acknowledged when convenient. That night, after the candles burned down to puddles of wax and the untouched slices of cake sweated beneath the dome, I stood alone in the dining room. The silence was thick and not peaceful. Not lonely, just thick, like walking through fog inside your own home. I didn't clear the table. I didn't wash the dishes. I just turned off the lights, room by room, one switch at a time. The hallway last. I passed the mirror there and caught my reflection. Not startled, not even surprised, just tired. There's a kind of tiredness that settles into your bones when disappointment becomes routine. Not a sharp ache, just a quiet erosion, like sand shifting underwater. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my hands. These hands had made 1,000 meals, buttoned tiny coats, braided Lucy's hair while she giggled and wiggled on the kitchen stool, held Shelley through 3 miscarriages, folded Mark's shirts for years after he moved out, just in case he came home needing something clean. And now they held nothing. My legs ached. My shoulders felt like they were wearing the weight of years no one had counted but me. I didn't undress. I lay down fully clothed, too worried to change. The pillow was cold. The sheets smelled of lavender from the sachet I tucked in last week. I used to like the scent. That night, it made me feel like I was trying too hard to be comforted. The house creaked in its usual places. The floorboard by the laundry room, the pipe above the pantry, the wind tapping against the gutter. But no voices, no laughter, no footsteps on the stairs. Just me, and the knowing. That was the hardest part, not the forgetting, not the cake untouched, not even the text. It was the knowing, the unshakable awareness that I had become convenient only in absence, that the people I had once folded myself around now moved with ease in the space where I used to be, and still, they would have said they loved me. They would have meant it. They just didn't see me anymore. Around midnight, I rose, not to eat, not to cry, just to move. I walked barefoot down the hallway, past the family photos, all those frozen smiles, all that effort to look like we belonged to each other. I didn't touch the frames, I didn't need to. I remembered what they looked like from memory. I opened the hall closet and pulled out the cedar chest. It was heavier than I recalled, or maybe I was just smaller now. I set it on the rug and lifted the lid. Inside, evidence of once being essential, a paper crown Jake made from construction paper, lopsided and glittered. A yellowed card from Lucy that read, "If I had 3 wishes, one would be for you to live forever." A macaroni necklace, half the pieces missing, strung on yarn that had long since frayed. I held these pieces of history in my lap, now more accustomed to silence than to children. I remembered birthdays where my lap was crowded, sticky fingers reaching for cake, heads resting briefly, comfortably. My name said 100 times with glee. Now, I was grandma once or twice a month in a text thread, if that. There's a weight to love when it goes unreturned, not withheld, just misplaced. You carry it because it once mattered. You carry it long after it's stopped being noticed. That night, I let it settle. I didn't argue with it. I didn't explain it away. I simply sat with it. And for the first time, I felt empty. Not clean, not free, just a broken bar emptied out. Like a house after the guests have left and the dishes are cold. Like a photo album with no one left to label the faces. Like a birthday with all the candles but no wishes. I woke just after dawn, still in yesterday's clothes. The lavender blouse wrinkled across my chest like a forgotten letter. The house was still, the kind of still that presses into your ears, reminding you of every absence. No tea kettle hissing, no birthday voices trailing down the stairs. Just the soft creak of the bed frame and the low hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Loyal as always. I sat up slowly, my knees stiff. My feet touched the cold floor. For a long moment, I just sat there. The cedar chest was still open where I'd left it. One of the cards had fluttered halfway onto the rug, the one that said, "You're better than cake." I picked it up and held it in my lap. There was no tear, no sigh, no dramatic swell of music like in those films where someone finds their strength. Just breath, measured, real, and a thought. This isn't how I want to feel anymore. It came without force, just a quiet presence in my chest. Not a cry for justice or revenge, just a simple decision, the kind that sits down beside you and waits until you're ready to move. I rose, walked slowly to the window, and pulled back the curtain. The street was quiet. Dew glistened on the grass. The neighbor's dog barked once, then settled. The world had moved on from my birthday, and I realized something I hadn't let myself admit. I had built this silence, too. Not the cruelty, not the neglect, but the space they now fill with absentia. I had carved that out with my patience. With every time I said, "It's okay," every time I smiled instead of spoke, every time I excused the lateness, the forgetting, the polite dismissals with, "They mean well." They did mean well, but I had allowed them to believe meaning well was enough. And maybe once, it had been. When they were young, when they were still learning how to love without needing something in return. When I still believed that love was always most powerful when it was quiet. But now, I needed something different. Not noise, not apologies, just a shift, a turning of the wheel back toward myself. I walked to the kitchen and made a cup of tea, Earl Grey. No sugar, just the way I've liked it since I was 21. I didn't make toast. I didn't set the table. Instead, I sat at the kitchen counter, the same place where Shelley once used to do her homework, legs swinging, voice humming while she copied vocabulary words onto index cards. I sipped slowly. The house felt different that morning. Not empty, not aching, just a broken bar still. But this time, I didn't feel swallowed by it. I felt like I had room to move. The calendar still hung on the fridge. That red circle still stared at me. My birthday. I took it down, sat at the table, and for the first time in a long time, I opened the junk drawer not for scissors or batteries but for a pen. I turned to next year, flipped through the months until I found July again, and then, on the 12th, I drew another red circle. But this time, I didn't write birthday dinner. I wrote 2 words. Small, careful. Me day. I stared at the letters for a long while, not because I wasn't sure, but because I wanted to remember how it felt to write something just for myself. No one else's schedule, no waiting for calls, no 6-place settings or piped frosting or name cards waiting for laughter that never came. Just me, just a day that belonged to me again. I didn't know what I'd do next. Not yet, but I knew something had ended last night, and not in grief. Not in bitterness but in quiet understanding. If they wouldn't celebrate me, then I would. Not out of spite, out of memory of the woman I used to be before the calls stopped. The woman who danced barefoot in the kitchen to Nat King Cole, who baked cakes just because, who wore pearl earrings to the grocery store. She was still here. I just hadn't looked for her in a while, but I would now, not because they remembered me, but because I finally remembered myself. The next morning, I put on lipstick, not for anyone else, just me, a soft rose color, the kind Arthur used to say made me look like spring. I hadn't worn it in months, maybe longer. The tube was nearly full, tucked in the back of the drawer behind cough drops and expired coupons. I held it in my hand for a moment, then unscrewed the cap and smiled at my reflection. My eyes were softer now, maybe a little tired, but still kind, still sharp. I ran a comb through my hair, wore the cardigan with the pearl buttons, not the good blouse, not the fancy shoes, just something nice, something comfortable, something that made me feel like myself again. I didn't look at the phone, I didn't check the group chat. Instead, I walked out the front door and down the street to the little diner by the pharmacy. The bell above the door jingled like it always did. The place smelled like maple syrup and coffee. The kind that's been warming since dawn. Booths half full, waitresses in faded aprons, the sound of silverware on ceramic. I liked it here. I always had. I chose a window seat, didn't ask for a table for 6, just one. The waitress came over. She was young, maybe 25, with kind eyes and chipped pink nail polish. She smiled. "Good morning." "Morning," I said. "Table for 1. Please." She nodded and poured me a cup of coffee. "You look nice. Going anywhere special?" I shook my head. "Yesterday was my birthday." "Oh," she said, lighting up. "Happy belated." She returned a moment later with a slice of cherry pie. "On the house," she whispered, as if we were conspirators. It wasn't cake, but it was perfect. I took a bite, slow and steady. The crust was flaky, the filling just tart enough to feel real. I looked around at the hum of people living their lives alone, in pairs, in passing conversation, and for the first time in a while, I didn't feel like a relic sitting apart from the world. I felt part of something again. Not a family reunion, not a birthday party, just a morning that belonged to me. When I finished, I left a $20 tip, not because the pie was worth $20, but because her kindness was. Because sometimes, the smallest gestures remind you that you still have the power to give, to receive, to be visible. She picked up the bill and said, "You made my day," and I thought, you made mine, too. That afternoon, I went home. I printed out the group text, the one with the confetti emojis and the empty promise. I found a simple wooden frame in the hallway closet, a one that once held a photo of Mark holding Jake as a baby. I slipped the message inside, and under it, I wrote in pen, "You taught me something valuable." I didn't hang it out of anger. I didn't mean it as a statement. I placed it on the shelf beside the photos and cards, like a record of truth, a reminder, not of the day they didn't show up, but of the day I did. That night, I made soup, not because I was hungry, but because it was what I liked. I ate in the same white bowl, the one with the little crack. Then I put it in the sink, washed it gently, and dried it by hand. As I turned out the lights, I paused at the fridge, flipped to next July, and smiled at the words written there. Me day, not circled for anyone else, not waiting on calls or plans or 6 empty chairs, just me, and the quiet, steady knowledge that I am still here, that I still count, that I can still celebrate the woman I've been, even if no one else remembers. The second cake sat untouched in the fridge. I hadn't thrown it out, not because I expected anyone to come, not because I held on to some flicker of hope, but because letting it sit there, perfect and uneaten, felt like the truest reflection of how things had become. It was a beautiful cake, 2 layers, frosted in lemon buttercream, delicate piped flowers along the rim. It had taken me hours, and not one slice had been claimed. Each time I opened the fridge for milk or carrots or a splash of cream, it stared back at me soft, sweet, and waiting, just like I had, until now. That morning, I woke before sunrise. There was no plan in mind, just a feeling, a quiet knowing in the pit of my stomach, that something needed to end. Not bitterly, not loudly, just fully. I brewed a small pot of tea, wrapped a shawl around my shoulders. Then I opened the fridge and pulled out the cake. I placed it on the counter, ran a warm cloth over the dome's glass. The kitchen was silent, not heavy, just honest. I stood there a long time, looking at it. This thing I made out of love, out of memory, out of the hope that someone might want to share it with me. But they hadn't, and still it existed, and that meant something. I didn't cut a slice, I didn't pack it into Tupperware. Instead, I retrieved the photo from the hall closet, the one of all of Amy, Shelley, Mark, Lucy, Jake, Emma, taken 10 years ago at the lake. Everyone laughing. Arthur holding Jake on his shoulders. I had framed it then, put it on the mantel. I held it in my hands now. It felt lighter than I remembered. I took a soft cloth and wiped it clean. Then I placed it in a box, along with a few others. Not out of anger, not out of erasure, just out of clarity. The mantel wasn't empty when I finished. It held the framed group text now, the one that said, "Happy birthday, Grandma, we're all slammed today." Rain check, and underneath it, in my own writing, "You taught me something valuable." Later that day, I carried the cake next door. My neighbor, Estelle, answered in curlers and a housecoat, blinking at the glass dome in my hands. "I heard it was your birthday yesterday," she said, eyes wide. "Mind if I stop by?" "Only if you're hungry," I said, and smiled. We sat at the table I had set for 6, just the two of us. 2 forks, 2 slices. She complimented the frosting. I poured her tea, and for once, the silence in the room wasn't about who didn't come, it was about who did. After she left, I walked to the living room, turned on the radio. Soft jazz, low and warm. I didn't dance, I just let the music fill the space where sorrow had once stood. Then I took the calendar off the fridge, the old one, the one with my birthday circled in red. I tore the page from the spiral, folded it in half, and slid it gently into the trash. No anger, no flair, just finality. A quiet goodbye to all the birthdays I'd waited for someone else to validate. A still, steady promise that I wouldn't wait again. When people forget you, you begin to forget yourself at first. But then one day, you remember, not in defiance, in peace, not to punish, to live. It's strange what you remember when things go still. Not the pain, that fades, eventually, dissolves into something less sharp. What lingers are the moments when you decided to keep going, even with no audience. Moments like pie at a quiet diner, a $20 tip and a stranger's smile, a red circle on next year's calendar that reads, simply, "Me Day." That's what stays, not the group chat, not the absence, but the choice to show up for yourself when no one else does. This morning, I stood at the kitchen sink, drying the last of the teacups. The sun came in through the lace curtain, dappling the counter with soft gold. The world hadn't changed overnight, my family hadn't called, but something in me was different. The ache had softened, not healed but quieted, like a song that had finally reached its final note. I looked up at the shelf above the sink. There, beside the sugar jar, was the framed group text. I hadn't moved it, and I wouldn't, not because I wanted to remember the sting, but because I wanted to remember the moment I stopped waiting. Underneath, in my own handwriting, those words still held. You taught me something valuable. They had. In forgetting me, they reminded me of myself. In failing to show up, they gave me the chance to arrive alone, yes, but whole. I've started writing again, not in journals, not for anyone else, just notes, Scraps of thoughts I tuck into drawers, observations of birds outside my window, the way the neighbor's wind chime sings when no one's listening, how the tea tastes better when I drink it slowly. I even bought a small travel bag online. It's blue, sturdy, big enough for 3 nights away. I don't know where I'll go yet, but the next July, on me day, I won't be home. I won't be setting a table for 6. I won't be baking a cake no one eats. I'll be somewhere quiet, somewhere warm, somewhere where I am no one's afterthought, not out of bitterness, out of love, for myself. The house is the same, the calendar still turns, but now, the space between birthdays belongs to me again, and if they call next year, if someone remembers and asks what I'm doing, I'll smile, and I'll say, gently, I already have plans, because in the end, it wasn't about who showed up for me, it was about learning to show up for myself, without permission, without apology, with both hands open and no expectation, just presence, just peace, just me. You didn't show up, but I did, and that's how I know I'll be alright.